Okay, so we're getting to the last session of the day. Excellent. And I got some calculus for you, right? So later you can come up to the stage and help me calculate. In my role today, I only look after monetization, right? So in-app monetization is for us the most important thing. But before I go to the nice nuggets that I have prepared for you, I give you a quick overview of our organization and the product that I'm working on. So Bitsmedia is very interesting because it actually has a founder story. So back in 2009, an ex-Googler full-stack engineer himself was building the company Bitsmedia, and it was called the Mobile Apps Factory. So in the name is already that the intention for Bitsmedia was actually to make various apps for various customers. So that was the idea. But he had a real aha moment. So since we had that many times now, he has seen how his wife was listening or waiting to listen to the radio when the fast-breaking times came on TV or on the radio. And he then thought, well, there must be a better way to do this. Being a full-stack engineer himself, and now the App Store being released for about 1 year, there sprung the idea for the app called Muslim Pro. And Muslim Pro is, so to say, really a religious super app for Muslims around the world. The interesting part about it is because it has started in Singapore, and many things that are normal in Singapore are not normal everywhere in the world. For example, when you get a letter from the government, it will be nicely translated in 4 languages, right? Always, everything. And that is a little bit in the DNA from the product. So now we have a tech leader, full stack engineer, and he's in Singapore. So right from the start, he translated the project into English, Bahasa, Malay, and French, and German. And at that time, 2009, there's not that many apps out there. So immediately it was a global success. And by now we are celebrating a lot of cool milestones. So we surpassed over 170 million downloads. We have an incredible 4.7 star reviews that is like amazing when you consider that we have 500,000 reviews, right? And still maintaining that quality over so many years is really a testimonial to how we try to keep the product up to date and relevant. So that means also that we're kind of like early in adopting new features. So I think almost 2 years ago, we already had like some AI chatbot that was trained on the Quran and Hadith and other religious texts. So we were always like kind of hands down techie, but being of service to the global user base. And about myself, so like in the introduction, I was lucky enough to work on various business problems. So just to name maybe 2 or 3, my journey in tech started in Shenzhen in China, and I was working for Anker. And Anker is like you might know it from the power banks or the Soundcore headphones. So the interesting part there was when I was working in marketing, we had to think of multiple channel strategies, and there the symbiosis between the various products that you push in the various channels, because an online sales channel has different economics than brick and mortar. And we had really amazing milestones. For example, we ended up getting sold in the Apple App Store, like on global scale, right? These are really, really big achievements for tech companies, right? Later, I worked more on subscription management in Shanghai for a global security camera company, and there I learned something about the so-called Polaroid effect. So you kind of like, you sell the camera, but it's not really about the camera, it's about the cloud subscription. And then coming from the marketing background, I could understand that and actually shift into the product department and focusing more on that selling. And since it was a global product, I already could collect my first experience on global pricing. And today I focus on monetization, and for us at Bitsmedia, the 2 most important revenue streams are programmatic advertisement and subscriptions. So here are just 2 interesting facts. They are actually coming from Google research, and it is said, I think there were some gamers in here too, that about 5% of app users in the world are willing to spend in-app. So that's a little bit the metrics. I'm not quite sure if we can second that, That might be a little bit different if you are like a VPN company or a streaming service. Then of course maybe the dynamics between subscribers and free users might be a little bit different. But on a mass market, global scale, that's a little bit the metrics what we're looking at. It's also what we're seeing depending on the market. The second important one that I want to share with you is also from Google research. They are estimating that the in-app advertisement market is going to grow 20% year on year until 2028. And it's going to reach around, I think, over $560 billion, right? That is more than Singapore's GDP, and it's about 100 billion more than the entire luxury industry in the world, right? So that's like big. In-app advertisement is maybe not always loved, but it is here to stay, right? It keeps the internet and a lot of applications free to use. So now that we have the overview, when thinking about monetization, there's a few little things I think to pay attention to. And for a lot of you, that's probably not new. I just want to put them out there. The first thing is understand kind of like the session count, so the usage frequency. And I think before there was a question, well, how do you break a pattern when it becomes unhealthy? And there I think the best way to think about it is think about a natural usage frequency. So when you think about a product, what is natural to use it, but what is not artificially amplified and increased and all that. And I think that's a pretty good starting point or a goal to stay in that healthy range, right? Just don't make it too artificial. And then the second important thing to understand is like how intense are these sessions? So how long are they? Because depending on the frequency and the intensity, you might choose a different way of monetization. And that brings me to the next slide. This one I like quite a lot because it bridges a lot between product and the monetization thinking, right? And what it suggests is that when you have features or you have multiple features or services that you have, you can segment them somehow in understanding what are the features that are most commonly used and have a high frequency, and what are features that are maybe only used seasonal or maybe for very particular reasons. And in the theory, it is suggested that depending on that feature usage, and of course also competition and all these other things, you would then choose how you monetize it, right? So for us, for example, the majority of sessions that we have are rather short because a user is coming to the app and just checks the prayer times, right? This is like a micro session. It takes less than 20 seconds, so really quick. They open the app, they go to that page, they see it, they close the app, and they're gone, right? So the thing is also, though, that there's a lot of other apps out there that are free, right? So there's really not too much to make of that, right? But then on the other hand, we have features that are very, very unique to us. For example, Islamic-friendly, family-friendly streaming, right? That's not very common out there, right? We have that. Or we also have now a new Reddit-like Muslim community where the fellow Muslims can like just post about their Friday prayers or whatever's going on in their lives, and they have the community around it, right? So when you are in a scenario like that and you have multiple targets, for example, conversion rates and monetizations and so forth, there's in the B2C environment more a common trend that you have multiple entitlements. So somebody before here was from Tinder, and I think Ravi Mata there was a very famous subscription or product manager, and he introduced like multiple tiers. So you might know, today you see it almost in every app that there's multiple tiers. You can unlock this or more devices or this and that and that. And that tiering is amazing because it allows you to tap into multiple monetizations touch points without having to cannibalize, right? That was a little bit before what we heard from Food Panda 2 when they wanted to find that one meal person, but you also don't want that everybody not just take the cheapest options, right? So multiple entitlements allow you to play with that quite a lot. Okay, so then when I think of in-app advertisement, I'm sure all of you have seen it. There's different degrees of intrusiveness, right? One of the things is the interstitial. And the interstitial is, so to say, the bread and butter ad format out there. It was introduced by Google, I think, in 2011, and has since gotten so many different variations, right? There's rewarded interstitials. You can time at what moment you can press X, and so forth, right? So it's a very versatile format by now. The second ad unit or format is very important for us is the app open format. That was introduced, I think, a few years later in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And what it allows publishers like us to do is to monetize the load screen while we're getting the session ready for the user. So in many apps, you might see there's a loader or some animation or something like this. So as a publisher, you can also choose to monetize that time to get the session ready for the user. So in the beginning, I described for us a lot of sessions are very short, right? So then, of course, this format is really a game changer for us, because now, while the user's waiting for the prayer times to be ready, we can just show that less intrusive format, and the user can then continue without us having to show another more intrusive ad. Okay. So now you are already halfway an ad monetization specialist, right? You know about frequency, you know about the intrusiveness levels, you know the TAM of ads, you know the subscription percentage that you can achieve, and pretty much set, right? So now the question is like, well, how do we start to optimize the entire thing? And there's a bit of a surprise, since for us it's a religious app. Number one is like brand safety, family safety. So you actually start with blocking controls, right? In the App Store, if you look, our app is 4 years and above, so we got to make sure that the advertisement that we show inside of the project align very strong with our user base. So they have to be relevant. We cannot all of a sudden show, I don't know, some alcohol advertisement, right? It just doesn't fit the user base. So we got to make sure that we are always aligning before we even think optimizing. So step one is actually making it harder, right? But that ensures brand safety all throughout, and that's important for us and our partners that we work with, right? So then the standard 3 steps are somewhat, well, you choose your network, you optimize your floors, and you link whatever attribution service you have. I want to give you one little tip for each of them. There's good insights for what platforms to choose, and you can think there the other way around. You can think about like, hey, what are the networks that most of us are currently using to acquire users? So now we see TikTok here today. Obviously, they're doing a really good job. They will appear here in the top 7. That is an excellent job for a newcomer. Or, wow, that's amazing. So now for us as a publisher, we can think not only would we want to advertise on TikTok, but would we also want to show TikTok inventory in our project. And that's kind of like the synergy that what we're looking for. And from time to time, I suggest checking this if you're working in monetization, because there's a lot of merger and acquisitions going on all the time. It's very dynamic, the ads environment. Okay, then on optimizing floor prices, I just want to show you this example, right? So you have to think, you have an ad inventory, and there's a lot of people that want to show their ad in there. And then you can like see on the top picture how many bids per partner you get at the various price points, right? And on the second image, you can see, now if I were to choose to increase the floor price, you see that that middle section has now completely disappeared. And now in that higher section, there's a little bit of an increase from a specific partner that we can see. Here, I just want to remind, all the data I'm showing is mock data, so don't take it for real, please. And in the end, you can see, like, usually all of the mediation platforms have amazing tools for A/B testing. And the A/B testing is not only important to improve here incrementally, it's also a means of data collection, because it allows you to do a lot of crazy tests, even by with relatively low risk. Okay, and then Link Firebase is what I've written here, but that's now very, it applies to us, because our app is natively developed, and it is developed on the Firebase platform. So that's all the Google environment. So of course for us then linking GA, AdSense and all that stuff is totally easy. But when you have a different ad stack, I'm sure there's a lot of other solutions. For example, attribution, one of the partners, Mixpanel, right? So there's various options depending on your ad stack. So the recommendation is just make sure that you create these connections, right? Because in the ad environment, to keep ads relevant, you need secure signals and information about the ad requester flowing. That is important to show relevant ads. Okay, so now that we've looked at these configurations and A/B testing, the question is then always like, well, is that actually the best configuration, right? And is there something else you can do? Particular when you are maybe how to say, a little bit more conservative in the way that you approach the monetization, right? So some people are very data driven, right? And that can become a trap, because in the A/B testing scenario, when you're very conservative and data driven, you might only think of incremental steps. You think, okay, 20% here, 10% there. But when you actually want to break out, you have to allow yourself to test more crazy things. So if anybody of you is in a role where you can A/B test, I would suggest you, maybe out of 10 A/B tests, do 2 crazy ones. Allow yourself to experiment really like far outlier scenarios, right? And you might find very interesting things. But the more important thing is you're collecting data. And it's a little bit like in the casino, right? Because in a casino, they say you cannot lose. You either win or you win experience, right? And here's a similar thing, because you make an A/B test, and either you find a winner or you found more data, right? Which is also helpful, right? So in that case, there's very little risk in doing that, right? So now you've collected data, and now I want to throw you to the actual content of the presentation that I wanted to share with you. And that is good old calculus, like in the school. So, so what it is, like any business problem that I've heard before, Food Panda or whatever it was, I immediately think, okay, how can you make an equation out of that, right? So for me, I know I can think of my earnings. They are literally a function of the price, the floor price that I send, and the match rate, the demand. Of course, there's many other keys that we can now add and complexify. So this is like a starting point, right? Now there's one more little complication, because you quite remember, like in school, the match rate is also somewhat a function of the price. So there's one more hoop to take. In the end, it would look like this. So you have earnings depending on the price and the match rate, where you have the price, inventory sold by match rate, right? And the reason why I show you this is not because I want to show you math, right? Before there was a question like, how many parents are here, right? Chances are somebody in your family has to study this right now, right? So they're actually still going to school. And then maybe next time you see them, you can throw them a real world example at them. And that might help them to think, oh, in future, math isn't that boring after all. You maybe can make an impact in your company. So then it's going to look like this. And that's the point where I need a few volunteers to help me calculate. Anybody back there, you? I'm just kidding. We're just gonna go through it, because you do really the standard stuff. You find your critical point, and you find the derivative, and then you just prove that it's a good thing. And in the end, what we have done is basically this. We created the function for the match rate here in blue that shows like, hey, depending on the price, less people will be willing to buy. And in green, you kind of like see your maximum earnings depending on the floor pricing that you've chosen, right? So that's pretty cool at this point, still pretty basic, right? So the beauty now with math is that regardless how complex your project gets, you can always visualize it. So in this scenario, I can very quickly show, hey, what's the difference between adding a partner, not adding a partner, having the optimal floor price or not floor price, which is very helpful when you talk to other stakeholders that are not in the ad optimization. So it doesn't only work for ad optimization. This exact same you can do with your conversion rates and getting people to subscribe, right? And the various problems that you're trying to optimize for. The very cool thing in the end is because you do that exercise, in this case, you might find something where you actually show lesser ads to the users, but in the end, you make more money for the organization, right? So it's really, when we heard before, the lady from Amazon, she was saying there's a difference between, how should you say, impression versus view, or the other way around, I think. And she's very right, because if I, as a monetization specialist, just think about, okay, I fill the inventory, just show every ads, the ads become less relevant for the user, right? So that is not only a problem in terms of monetization, but maybe even for people that want to advertise in our projects, right? We want to actually have a good inventory. And now, when you see this, you actually see that you can almost forego half of your inventory and still make more money, right? So that means the increment of the impression has increased so much, right? which is in the end like a win-win-win-win-win situation, because the user sees less ads, the partner have better clicks, and for us we have a maximum yield, right, which is very, very nice. So I think I made it in 15 minutes, is it? So that is the end of my presentation. So my name is Pablo. I love monetization. If you have any questions around it, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.